Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today we're working with a sequence for your upper back. Make sure that you've got 2 blankets, 2 blocks, a belt and a chair. We'll begin with a reclining version of Sukhasana, and we'll get a gentle opening into the upper back. We'll use the blocks. We'll have one block on its side edge for your head. The back of the skull will rest onto it. The other block still on its side edge, but for your upper back. It comes just a little bit down from where the base of the neck is. So in that region of the spine between the shoulder blades. This will be the setup that for most people will work well. If you tend to be a little rounded in the upper back, a bit tighter in that area, potentially when you lie back over both of these blocks, your chin might be lifting higher than your forehead. If that is the case, we'll just boost the height of the head block, not by putting a blanket on top of the block, but a blanket beneath the block. So that's an option if you need it, but try first of all just with the blocks as they are. And so we're in cross-leg Sukhasana and lying back, and we come back onto the elbows, and we can then prop ourselves up with the elbows, and with the hands we can just fine-tune the position of the block. Make sure that the block is straight with the spine, not diagonal. And then as you lie back, just check where it comes to. If it's too low, and it is a little bit for me, it'll create some discomfort towards the middle back and lower back. If it's too high, it's not going to give you that support and lift in the upper back. So for most people, it's just a little bit away from the base of the neck, heading in the direction of the spine. So not right on C7, but just a little bit beneath there. With your hands, then you can reach back and check the head block and just feel the back of the skull there. Make sure that it's right in the center of the block. Then assess your chin and forehead. If the chin is lifting higher than the forehead, it might be that you need to increase the height of the block, as I showed there, adding a blanket to it. And then we'll bring our arms out by the sides. The palms are facing up. Let your shoulders release and relax down. And just so that we get the option of working with both of the cross legs, that's without disturbing the upper body as it's balanced on the blocks. We'll just change over that cross leg, bringing the other leg around in front. And then just keep your attention there where the legs are. The adductor area from the inner groin towards the inner knee. Just make sure that the muscle and tendon regions there are relaxed. It helps the knees to soften down. And someone looking at you from the outside, particularly if they were looking at you from the side, would see a nice curvature in the lower back, that lumbar curvature. And it's nice to have that with this chest opening, but make sure that you're not adding to that a push or a hardness. So where the lower back joins into the pelvis, it's just soft, relaxed, and we're just allowing the blocks to comfortably lift the chest up, open the chest, and as a consequence of that, there will be a nice curvature in the lower back, but don't overdo that. So that you're not resisting the block, but just releasing down and into it. In terms of the chest, feel the support that the chest is given here with the block. And when you breathe in, the side ribs, they expand, they move outwards, but also they lift upwards. It's a nice feeling. I want to encourage that. And right in the center of the chest, as the inhalation gets fuller, the center of the chest, it moves a little in the direction of the throat. Keep the throat relaxed. Your eyes relaxed, your shoulders relaxed, let the elbows and hands rest down into the floor. So we'll come back to some of these adjustments with the upper back shortly, but let's now bring the knees together, feet flat to the floor, roll to the side, and come up. We'll go to a variation of Adho Mukha Virasana, one where we use the chair. You'll need the chair at the far end of the mat, have the back of the chair facing you. We're going to be using the top of the chair, and the hands will be firmly gripping the top of the chair. It might just pay if you have a quick look here so that you can see where we're headed. Legs as we normally have them, knees apart, hips back to heels. And we then just need to fine tune the distance with the chair away from the knees so that you can get a nice traction through your shoulders with the elbows straight, but with the ability to press your hips right back down onto your heels. So if your hips are lifting off your heels, that will mean that the chair's a little bit too far away. If you're not getting a nice opening traction through the shoulder region, then it means the chair is too close to you. So I'll just give you some time just to fine tune that distance, have the hands quite close together. Sometimes we press the hands down flat onto the top of the chair, but for this particular pose we'll be gripping more firmly, wrapping the fingers around the frame so that we can get a nice opposing action of the hands being held one way whilst the hips are descending back and down the opposite way. The leg region, so we just looked at it in the previous pose, that tendency for gripping hardness in the adductor area, and it might be a little bit there as well here, but also the quadriceps, the muscles associated with the fronts of the thighs. They're the ones that you would need to engage if you were to push your hips up and away from the floor. But we want the opposite. We want the hips to descend back and down towards the floor. So those muscles need to soften, release and relax. As they do, your thigh bones are able to descend deeper into the body. As the pelvis anchors more, the pubic bone, it lengthens away from the navel. Feel the back of the pelvis moving down and away from the spine. Your sitting bones are getting closer to the floor. Your tailbone as well, lengthening downwards and even a little bit tucked under towards the toes. And as you take that added care to anchor the pelvis, as if someone had their hands on your pelvis, pressing it down, through how we get that added bit of opening through the shoulder region. And once the shoulders have opened, then we're able to access the upper back. So that area just down from the base of the neck, a nice containment and length to that region of the body. Okay, let's release. We'll keep the chair there. We'll keep our hands on the top of the chair, but let's revert from having the hands gripping the frame to now palms flat. And the knuckles of the fingers where they join into the palm just a little bit overlaps past the top of the chair. We've got the fingers spreading. Try to, before we step the feet back, just look at your hands and make sure that the hands are symmetrical. So it's really common here for one hand to be uneven in comparison to the other. Have both hands on the same angle, fingers evenly spreading, and more or less the shape of the hands symmetrical as we then step the feet back. So we've got a version, like a crossover between Uttanasana and downward facing dog pose. So our ankles directly under hips, and we've just carefully placed the hands, fingers spreading, in a nice firm, even downward contact with the hands into the top of the chair. And as we do that, we straighten the elbows. They need to lift as they straighten, and we maintain that lift in the elbows as we consciously bring the upper arm bones, where they join the shoulders, the upper arm bones joining the shoulders in a downward direction, closer to the floor. The outer armpits, the skin region there, it turns and descends towards the floor. The shoulder blades descending towards the floor. They have the ability to be loose on the body and slide around on the back ribs, but here they're firm and pressing down and helping to contain the upper back area, the spine between the shoulder blades as well. It's brought into the body. There's a nice length and straightness, containment through the upper back. And then we just need to make sure that we're not confusing that with the lower back dipping. So it's probably an issue more for flexible body types. And we just need to monitor that by moving the back of the pelvis away from the spine so that the navel lifts a fraction towards the spine. It just eliminates that tendency for the lower back to collapse and sink. Okay, and then let's step forwards to come out of the pose. We'll put the chair off to the side. Make sure that you leave some room here behind your mat, so don't place your chair directly there. We'll be coming back to some block variations that will help to improve mobility in the upper back. We're going to start using the blocks flat, so eventually we'll be using them on their side edge, a little taller, but initially flat to the floor, their lowest height. We'll have both the blocks placed against one another, butted against one another, and we'll then take a blanket, and so normally would have the blanket stacked in this configuration, easy to use then for shoulder stand, and we take one of those folds out so that we have this shape with the blanket. Try to keep the blanket as neatly folded as possible as you then place it over the blocks, and you're leaving an overlap here at the far end of the mat, and that will be for your head to come onto so that you won't have the head on the floor. You've got this end of the blanket for your hands to grip, and taller people, you might find that your elbows bend a little bit when you go to reach the blanket in a moment. Just be clear, there's going to be 3 stages to coming into this pose. For the pose to be most effective, it's important that you really clarify each stage. The first stage, and I'll show it as well, but it may be good if I just verbally describe it first. First stage, you've got your shoulders level to the end of the block, but off the floor. The back of your skull will be in contact with the floor. Pause there for a moment, then we slide back without doing this with the shoulders. So the shoulders, they want to maintain that grip with the block, pulling the skin back away from the neck. We slide halfway down, so the back of the skull to the floor, the shoulders halfway down from the height of the block to the floor. We pause there. The third stage is where the head and the shoulders just lightly in contact with the floor. And this edge of the block, it should be quite a nice but firm adjustment into the upper back, that area that for many of us is a bit stiff and potentially even rounding in an outward direction. So let's try that. If you need to just glance at the screen, you can. So depending on how tall you are, your hips will either be on the blocks. Shorter people, that will be the case. Taller people, you'll probably find your hips begin off the edge of the blocks, and that's okay. But for everyone, as we then lie back of the skull will be to the floor, and the tops of your shoulders will be level to the edge of the block, and your shoulders will be off the floor. So this is just a preparatory position so that we can then hold the blanket. Important that we do that, otherwise when we slide we might find that it's just the blanket that's sliding. We want the blanket to remain stationary and for the body to slide. But I tried to demonstrate it, that tendency for the shoulders to zigzag a bit, one lift and then the other lift. We want to avoid that, because if we do that, we lose the pulling of the block on the skin of the upper back. That's the most important thing to maintain here. Feel it now as you just lift your hips a fraction by pressing your feet down, and with your feet just push yourself back a little. Feel how the block grips the skin of the upper back, pulls it away from the neck, and we want to intensify that as we just slide back a little bit and then pause with the shoulders halfway down to the floor. Crucial that you've kept that stretching sensation on the skin and the muscle fibre there in the upper back. And without losing that, so without lifting the shoulders and releasing that grip on the skin of the upper back, we'll go to that third stage now. So again, lifting the hips just a fraction, pressing with the feet in order to slide back, keep the contact of the block into the upper back, and stop when the backs of your shoulders just reach the floor. There's not a lot of margin for error in this particular 2-block variation. If the pose feels now like a bit of a nothing pose, like it's not adjusting the upper back, it might be beneficial to come out of it and re-enter the pose, but carefully, slowly, making sure that you're not coming too far over. If the shoulders come too much to the floor, then the blocks tend to just disappear into the lumbar curve, and then they're not really achieving very much. We want the blocks to be quite firmly adjusting that stiffer area up nearer to where the base of the neck is. Once we've found that, we can then start to straighten our legs, just so that we feel balanced. Probably the ankles will need to be a bit wider than your hips. You can let your feet turn out as they would in Shavasana. And your arms are now more relaxed out by the sides with the palms facing up. Feel what's occurred there. The shoulders have been held back to the floor quite firmly. It would actually be nice if someone came and firmly pressed down onto the shoulders into the floor. The blocks, if we've come into the pose correctly, they've drawn the skin of the trapezius area away from the neck. There's a nice ongoing sense of stretching there, traction. As a result of that, the side ribs, they lift upwards. Feel it when you, particularly as you breathe in, there's some movement with the center of the chest in the direction of the throat. So you want to encourage that, but without deepening the breath. So a pose that, particularly if there is some stiffness there, it might be a good one to come back to later in isolation and spend a longer timing, so 10 minutes even in this position, and that can really help to improve mobility, elasticity in the upper back. Today we're just getting more of a taste of the pose, and let's then start to come out of it by bending your knees, and we can then just roll to the side. Generally the left side will be a good one to roll to, and we'll then come up, and let's, before we go further, just get the blanket and refold it more carefully, so that we've got a nice neat blanket there that we can then use again shortly when we need to use it again. And we'll stay with the two blocks, but we're going to increase their height now. So they're flat currently. We'll turn them onto their side edges so they're a little bit taller. And as we used them earlier for our simple cross-leg variation right at the start of the class, we'll have one rotated 90 degrees for the head, and the other one will be for the upper back. I'm going to use the wall this time, so our feet will be coming to the wall, and we'll need a three-fold blanket for placing underneath our buttocks. So we'll take our blanket and bring it into this shape, into a threefold, and then we need to measure our distance there by sitting on the blanket and bringing our feet to the wall, so that our blanket is a leg's length distance away from the wall. You might just need a few goes at checking that, and then we can, now before we lie back, let's just make sure that we've got our belt within reach, and good if we adjust the buckle so that when we place the belt around our wrists, the belt is keeping our wrists shoulder width distance. And then as we lie back, just make sure you can easily reach your belt. Again, we can come back initially onto the elbows, and then propping ourselves up with the elbows, and with the hands you can still reach in and just fine-tune the position of the block. Make sure that it's level with the spine, so not angled to the right or the left. As you then lie back, as we had the block earlier in the sequence, it needs to come close to the base of the neck, not right up as high as that, just a little beneath there. And the block ideally positioned in that upper back area, shoulder blade area. It shouldn't feel as if it's pushing hard into the mid back. So I'll give you a few moments just to fine tune that. If you needed to add that blanket at the start of the class in order to keep your chin and forehead level, then you also need to keep that blanket here for these variations. We're going to work with two variations. The first one, we'll keep our arms straight and we will use the belt. Let's head there now. Pick up your belt, place it around both wrists. The extraneous bit of belt, the tail of the belt, can be a little distracting if you have it right in the center of where the hands are. So I was purposefully move the buckle closer to one wrist. Don't have the buckle on the skin, but just near to the skin, and that way the tail of the belt won't be distracting in your face or covering your eyes when in a moment you bring your arms over the head. So you've got the arms vertically up, the belt placed around the wrists, you've got your loop of your belt adjusted to keep your wrists shoulder width. And then let's turn the arms so that the palms face towards the wall. Thumbs are towards the center, fingers pointing directly upwards towards the ceiling, the palms facing the wall that your feet are in contact with. And something that we can often employ with the arm variations where we take our arms over the head, to varying degrees it's helpful, but it's worth looking at that movement of resisting the shoulder sockets into the body, away from the ears. So it can be helpful for some people and unhelpful for other people, and we always need to balance that action, but let's just work with it and only it initially, and then we can see if we can refine it. So imagine someone with their hands on your shoulders, just pushing your shoulders towards your pelvis. So there is some benefit in that, but we want to make sure that as we do that, we're not allowing the upper arms to sink down towards the floor. So, and think even more specifically of where the biceps are. So there's that general biceps area, and then if we hone in a little more closely, more detail, there's the inner biceps. It's on the thumb side of the arm, and then zooming in that little bit more, the inner biceps near the armpit shoulder area. Just make sure that's not dropping. Lift it as high as possible, and someone from the outside would see your belt lift, your hands lift, your fingers get taller, and you're just conscious there of lifting the biceps, not allowing it to drop. We really don't need to think too much about resisting the shoulders away from the ears. Instead, think more just about keeping the triceps muscles firm, and the way we can do that is by pressing out into the belt. So pressing into the belt, the elbows straighten, the triceps firm, you're lifting your biceps as high as possible and maintaining that as you now start to bring the arms back and over the head. Keeping the elbows straight, but keep moving the biceps outwards and away from the body. And if we did that and only that, there might be a nice length through the shoulder region, but the sense of instability. And so just to return that sense of solidness, of connectedness, we'll just press into the belt, firm the triceps. And probably just as a consequence of that, the shoulder sockets will move back into the body a little bit. It's not that we're forcing that action. Think more of just firming the triceps, straightening the elbows, lengthening the biceps outwards with the hands, with the belt, away from the body. And make sure that you are not pushing up away from the block. Again, we looked at it right at the start of the class where the spine and the pelvis join. Just keep relaxed. There'll be a natural curvature there, but you don't need to exaggerate that curvature. Make sure that you're completing each breath, each exhalation. Release onto the block at the end of the exhalation. Okay, and then we'll raise the arms back up. Second one of these arm variations, we won't need the belt. We'll just put it off to the side. And then we'll fold our arms. It's the loose fold of the arms. So we can cross the forearms, and then with our fingers, just gently cup the points of the elbows. So we've got both hands. It's more the finger area as opposed to the palm. Just the fingers, just gently cupping the points of the elbows. The point that the elbow makes when the arm bends. And keep the fingers slightly firm, and we can resist the elbows against the fingers and feel how that helps to spread the collarbone area. And it just helps to avoid that narrowing impingement potential when the arms come back over the head. We don't want to be pinching, narrowing the tendons and the muscles there around that inner shoulder area. So think again where the biceps joins the shoulder. It's close to where the collarbones are, close to where the armpits are. Lift up there as high as possible. And Resist with the fingers, but press the elbows out against the fingers so that your collarbones spread. And then we'll start to bring the arms back and over the head. Think of the biceps leading there, so the biceps moving outwards and away from the chest. Now that the arms have come over, we will get more relaxed shortly, but just for the time being, resist again with your fingers. Press out with your elbows so that you get that ability to broaden and spread across the collarbone area. And then as we progressively start to relax the elbows and let them release downwards towards the floor, the shoulder sockets of their own accord, they soften and they release back into the body. And you'll feel as that occurs, the forearms just naturally release down closer to the floor. We don't want there to be any hardness, any narrowness across the shoulder area. Now we've crossed the arms one way, let's bring the arms up. I've got my right forearm crossed in front of my left forearm. So see which way you've got your arms crossed, but let's now bring the arms the other way so that we cross the other forearm in front, but still just gently cupping the elbow points with the fingers. For me, the contact there is where the fingers join the palm, and then again just bringing the arms over. Once the arms have come into position, resist with the fingers, press out with the elbows into the fingers so that you get that nice spreading, broadening across the collarbone area. Try to broaden the very outer collarbone, the bit nearest to the armpit and shoulder region, so that there's space there for the tendons, for the muscle fibre, for the skin as well. And then we can start to progressively release and relax the elbows and the forearms down. As they do, the shoulder sockets start to let go. They keep that broadness that you've created, and without pushing and forcing, they just move a little bit deeper back into the body. We're allowing the block to give a nice firm adjustment to the upper back. And it's giving us a nice opening in the shoulders simultaneously. Okay, and then let's release. So this next pose, a version of Purvottanasana, will be using a little more muscular effort to get that same lift and containment into the upper back. Let's come up and take our chair now, and we'll just get our blanket back to its original fold. Blocks out of the way, and we'll take our chair, place it with the back of the chair to the wall. We'll leave just a finger's width gap there between the top of the chair and the wall. You'll see why shortly. And then sitting in the seat of the chair. So we'll go to Purvottanasana, but first of all, just to really get that sense of the shoulders being pulled back and down, let's reach back through the inside of the frame of the chair, and we'll hook the fingertips around the edge of the seat. And then to varying degrees, you'll need to just move your hips forwards so that we get a nice traction of the shoulders being pulled back and down, but with the spine and chest in an upright position, your eyes looking directly forwards. So we want to then grip firmly with the hands, but the shoulders, they roll back. The trapezius, the muscle in the upper back, near the neck, it's drawn downwards. The side ribs, they move forwards. The center of the chest, it lifts upwards. And we want to continue that firm grip with the fingers, but start to apply more downward pressure now with your heels. So your heels press down, and that area where the backs of the thighs join the buttocks, press down there as well. Feel how that helps to generate added lift in your spine and your chest. And the back of the skull, they all lift up, but your shoulders are held with traction back and down by that firm grip in your fingers. And notice that nice containment in the upper back. It's moved deep into the body. There's a corresponding opening in the chest that we want to bring to this next pose, Purvottanasana. So we'll change our hand position. The hands will now come to the sides of the chair. And again, we're hooking the fingers underneath the seat, but make sure that you're allowing enough room for the heels of your hands to press firmly down into the seat. Now, in order to get that, the hips need to move out of the way. So we'll just shuffle forwards with the pelvis. We come to the point where the sitting bones have come just over the edge of the seat of the chair. It's a little bit precarious, but the grip of the skin and the muscle fibre there, closer to where the tailbone is and sacrum is, means that we can still hold our position there on the seat of the chair. We won't be there for a long time. It's not the most comfortable way of sitting on a yoga chair, but it suits this pose nicely and gives us room for placing our hands. Now make sure that you've got a firm contact with the heels of the hands into the seat of the chair. You've got your shoulders directly over your wrists. Guard against leaning back with your shoulders. Keep your shoulders directly above your wrists. We'll now straighten our knees. And when we do that, the heels come to the floor, the balls of your feet begin off the floor, but our objective now is to lift our hips and bring the balls of the feet down, and we'll then be looking up towards the ceiling as we do so. Let's just start a couple of times. We won't hold too long, but just checking each of those movements. Shoulders roll back, the chest lift up, and now we need to press down with our hands and lift our hips in order to bring the balls of the feet to the floor, and you're looking up towards the ceiling with your eyes. We won't hold too long initially. Just release back down, reset your hips, sitting bones just off, knees straight, heels to the floor, shoulders roll back. Just watch that tendency for the shoulders to lean back as you lift up. So keeping the shoulders over the wrists. Exhale, lift your hips, big toe bases down, hips lift up, you're looking up towards the ceiling. And then release back down, rearrange your hips, sitting bones just over the edge of the seat of the chair, heels to the floor. We'll go again. So we're keeping the shoulders directly over our wrists. It means that when the hips lift up, they need to lift up and move forwards, and that helps you to bring the balls of the feet down. Let's go again. Exhale, lift up. We'll hold a little longer this time. So balls of the feet press down, keep your knees straight, and use the body flesh to lift the pelvis higher, but keep your navel softening back into the body as you look up towards the ceiling. And then release back down. Just sit the more regular way in the chair just for a moment, just to let the strength return back into the arms. And then let's go last time. Purvottanasana, sitting bones over the edge, hands in position, keeping your shoulders directly over your wrists, lift your hips upwards and forwards, big toe bases pressed down, knees straight, lift the hips, and then pressing your hands down that region of the back. We've had the block in there a few times already. Lift that area upwards, away from the seat of the chair, looking up towards the ceiling above. And then release down and come up. We can keep the chair where it is. We'll be going to upward facing dog pose, a variation of upward facing dog pose. We'll just turn the other way, but the hands are more or less in the same position, so the heels of the hands onto the seat of the chair. Many of you will have metal chair without the foam cushioning on the seat. If that's the case, it might be getting quite strong on the sensitive area there near the heel of the hand. If you've got an extra yoga mat would be better than a blanket because it will have good grip. Otherwise, if you need to, the blanket's there. Just make sure that the blanket's not going to be sliding on the chair when you press down onto it. So we start here with the hips over the ankles, and the end point where we're headed here, we want the pubic bone in as close as possible to the edge of the seat of the chair. You'll have the option of shuffling your feet in a little closer or a little further back once we get to that point. And let's head there now. So we bring our shoulders over our wrists and the chest comes through the upper arms. And if you need to, just walk in a little closer with the feet to do so. Make sure that the pubic bone is close to the seat, the edge of the seat of the chair. Chest has come through the arms, your knees are straight, shoulders are back, the trapezius down, the side ribs forwards, and the center of the chest lifting upwards. You can even look a little now towards the ceiling, making sure that the chin lifts simultaneously with the sternum bone. And then press back to your start position, and we'll repeat that. So chest through, shoulders back. Now make sure your knees remain straight. Pressing your hands down, we're lifting the chest, the chin, the eyes, also the front of the pelvis. Keeping your knees straight, the fronts of the thighs as well, lifting with the chest in the direction of the ceiling. And then press back. We'll do one more. Now this time the option of pointing the toes back, and I'll preempt it, most likely that for most people it potentially will be a step too far, but for some people who are more agile and open in the upper back, it will just bring that next layer of opening and deeper opening to that region of the thoracic spine. You can try it, and if need be, you can always come back to that position of having the toes tucked under rather than pointing back. So let's try it. Bring the hips forwards, and then 1 foot at a time, we'll come onto the tops of the feet with the toes pointing back. Don't allow too much weight to sink back into the feet. Keep your hands firmly pressing down, and straighten your knees with the lower shins join the ankles, bring closer to the floor, but your chest lift upwards towards the ceiling. And then tuck the toes back under and press yourself back, and then we can step forwards. Keep the chair where it is. We've ideally retained that little bit of a gap there for our fingers to fit in between the frame of the chair and the wall. This next variation, easier for taller people to get their hands right up onto the top of the chair, but we've got this whole area of the frame to work with incrementally if you need to. So just work to your capacity. We will be bringing the hands up. For some people, and easier for the taller ones, to get your hands right up onto the top of the chair. Potentially you need padding for your knees here. If you've got a hard floor surface, you can either double your mat over, folding the mat back towards your knees, or again, an additional yoga mat probably would be preferable to a blanket, because a blanket tends to be a little slippery for the knees. If that's all you have, then a blanket will suffice, but make sure that you're not allowing your knees to splay out or slip out wider than the hips. Hands then come onto the frame of the chair. For me, the buttocks are a little bit away from the edge of the chair as I then walk the hands up and work to your capacity. See if the hands will come all the way up onto the top of the chair. The intention here is to get a shoulder opening combined with a chest lift and an upper back containment, and you can get that at any point there on the frame of the chair. So don't force. It shouldn't be painful for the elbows. Any of you getting discomfort in the elbows, just slightly bend the elbows, and don't over hook the shoulders back. More important here that the backs of the shoulders spread away from the spine, so that we're retaining that space across the collarbone area, also the shoulder blade area. Just a little bit it feels as if the tops of the shoulders lean forwards to achieve that. We don't want to head too far in that direction. Equally, we don't want it to aggressively just pull the shoulders back and pinch the shoulders in towards the back of the spine. So we just want a nice balance there. And then pressing the shins down, move your hips forwards, pressing your shins down and pressing your hands onto the top of the chair. Lift your chest upwards, sides of the chest, the center of the chest, but keep your shoulders down and away from your ears. It would be helpful for someone just to come and gently press down with their hands onto your shoulders, and you would then be able to get that lift in your spine, in your chest, but without the shoulders following. Okay, and then we'll release. We'll do a similar variation. For me, I just need to move a little bit further away from the chair so that I can now reach back with my hands and have the palms flat into the center of the seat of the chair. Have your little fingers, the tips of your little fingers, touching as you place your hands onto the seat of the chair. And I'm just going to move myself just that little bit further out so that now I can still press my shins down, move my hips forwards. And seen from the side, your hips will be directly over your knees, and if anything, just slightly further forwards than your knees. So a slight forward leaning angle with the fronts of the thighs. The fronts of the thighs, they are moving forwards and downwards. The backs of your thighs lift upwards from the back of the knee towards the buttock as you press your shins down. And in terms of getting that upper back opening and lift, a little bit that comes from the hands pressing down into the seat of the chair, but it's especially the case if whilst they do that, whilst they press down, they're as if stretching the seat of the chair in an outward direction. Try it, so that you're as if trying to stretch the space there between the little fingers in a wider direction. Side ribs lift, centre of the chest lifts. You can then look up towards the ceiling, but that area where the spine joins the neck, moving it deep into the body. Okay, and then we'll release and let's come up. We'll move our chair now a little bit further back away from the wall. We'll need to refine the distance a little more exactly shortly, and at this point often it's beneficial to have your chair not on your yoga mat but on the floor where it's able to slide a little bit. It just, particularly with the second variation, will help you to maneuver your chair into just the right position. For me, I'm just fairly familiar with this way of working here. I know more or less the distance my chair needs to be away from the wall. I can sort of guess that from the start. For that reason, I'm keeping my chair on the yoga mat. We'll place a blanket over the seat of the chair. For many of you with the metal chair, the blanket tends to be a bit slippery on the seat. For that reason, some people like to put a folded yoga mat and then the blanket. That works well if you're not, as I am, keeping your chair on the mat. You know, just take the mat, fold it in half again, place it over the seat of the chair, and then put the blanket there. And now the other thing I'll show, the assumption here is that you're up and running with chair back bends, but and knowing that this is a class more specific for upper back, it might be that some people have sore necks that are working with this sequence. So for that reason, we'll give the option of having some blocks here for the back of the skull to rest onto. If you're practicing by yourself, often that is a good way of just starting that way. Then you can push the blocks out of the way if they're not necessary. But the way to get the blocks in position, if we use the first block just as a measuring device, so we put the block level with the feet of the chair, and then our second block, as we did earlier, we just butt it up against the first block as if we were going to do that pose lying back over the two blocks. But then we get the first block and we take it and we balance it on the second block, and we place it there as a support for the back of the skull. And if we take the care just to position it that way, in a moment when your head comes back, it will quite easily come onto the back of the skull, support it, and help to support your neck. So that's an option. I'm going to take the blocks away, but keep them there if you need them. And then we sit through the frame of the chair. We're going to do two of these. The first one we'll do knees bent, and we won't use the wall. The second one will be straightening the knees, and then the feet will need to come to the wall. But initially, bring your hips through. Maybe before we lie back, just reach back and feel with one hand where your shoulder blades are, the lowest part of the shoulder blade. You can move the other arm around just to get a sense of exactly where the shoulder blade is. Eventually we want to lie back with the shoulder blades just over and off the edge of the chair, but that initial sensation of lying back, we want to have a bit of an overlap so that the shoulder blade's a little bit off, a little bit on the seat of the chair, and then we can slide, a bit like what we did with the blocks earlier, and we get that sense of traction, the skin and the muscle fibre being pulled away from the neck. We don't want to linger too long in that position because it can put a little bit of a strain on the neck. Just even a moment or two there, just so we feel that pulling sensation. Let's try it now. Hips come through, lie back, have the shoulder blades partially on, partially off the edge of the chair, And then we just slide ourselves carefully back until the shoulder blades come just over the edge of the chair. The neck can then release and the head hang back. Some of you might have the blocks there for the back of the skull to rest onto. Got your knees bent, your feet flat to the floor, your feet are hip width, toes straight, and your hands are gripping the frame of the chair. Make sure that your elbows are up and onto the seat of the chair. You might need to tuck your elbows in a little closer to the sides of the body in order for them to fit on the seat of the chair. It's an important aspect because we want to, in a moment, press the elbows down. But before we do so, let's just make sure that the shoulders are moving away from the ears. As if someone had their hands on your shoulders, just gently pressing them away from the ears, and then maintaining that, then press your elbows down into the seat of the chair. And it gives you the ability to coil your back ribs up so that there's less of a passive contact with the upper back onto the edge of the chair. The chair more of a device for which to press your elbows down into, as opposed to your upper back to passively lie back over. So that lift into the thoracic spine and the shoulder blade area. It's also in the side ribs. The side ribs are lifting up, and the sternum bone is moving in the direction of the throat. Keep your navel relaxed, feet firm. Okay, and then we'll come out of the pose leading up with the chest, bring the head up last. Sit neutral for a moment. This time we will be straightening our legs. For shorter people, sometimes the seat of the chair can push up into the backs of the thighs and prevent you from straightening the knees. And if that is the case, you just put a little bit of support under your heels. So we've got the two blocks there, and we put them flat to the floor. Just elevates your feet a little bit and allows you to completely straighten your knees. In terms of measuring the distance, it's trial and error. Often good to start a little closer than you think you'll need to be, and that way when you find the wall with your feet, you can press into the wall, straighten your legs, and the chair slides back into just the right position. You won't be able to do that if, like me, you've got your chair on the mat, and equally if you've got a carpet surface, sometimes that can prevent the chair from sliding as well, in which case you just need to come up and manually move the chair. We'll head there now. So hips through, slide back, let the skin of the upper back pull away from the neck, elbows up onto the seat of the chair, and we'll straighten the legs. The balls of the feet come to the wall, the heels remain on the floor. Important that your knees can completely straighten. For taller people, the seat of the chair remains more towards the buttocks and the sacrum. For shorter people, the seat of the edge of the chair gets into the back of the thigh, and we just don't want that to prevent you from straightening your knees. Important that your knees are completely straight. If you need the blocks there, then you can put the blocks under the heels. Shoulders away from the ears, then the elbows pressed down. Let's change the grip of the hands. Rather than holding, clasping the frame of the chair, we'll have the palms flat onto the frame of the chair with the fingers pointing up, and it enables us to press onto the frame of the chair. And as we do that, it's not that the back ribs then get pushed passively onto the seat of the chair. We press onto the frame whilst lifting the back ribs up and into the body. The side ribs lift. And the main benefit from having the hands this way, the chest it remains in that lifted position, but as we press against the frame, the sternum bone, the breastbone, it's able to move towards the throat, and the skin, the muscle fibre there, and the upper back, it's able to move away from the neck. Keep your navel relaxed, whilst pressing firmly your feet into the wall. Okay, and then to come out of the pose, we'll bend the knees and come up leading with the chest. Bring your head up last, sitting upright position just for a few moments there. And then we can come out of the chair. And some of you will have yoga mat blanket there on the seat. Let's remove them. And then we'll release our back by sitting in the chair. We've got to reverse back in the chair See if you can get your hips even coming a little bit through the frame of the chair. Your feet, then they come just a little bit wider than the front legs of the chair. Just look down at your knees, make sure that the distance between the knees is sufficient for your shoulders to neatly fit down in between them. As we then reach down and place our hands to the floor, so the shoulders, upper arms just neatly fitting there beside the inner knees, and we can start to release our neck and our head. The lower back, it releases at different speeds for different people, and it might be that your back feels a bit tight, and for that reason it might be beneficial just to keep your hands in this initial position. Otherwise though, we can take things a bit further by reaching through the front legs of the chair and holding either the back legs. For most yoga chairs there's a crossbar that runs between the back legs. If you're lucky enough to have that, you can hold that, grip it firmly, and then lift your head, look across the room. Keep your heels pressing down, keep your sitting bones anchored to the seat of the chair, but move your whole spine, your chest as well, forwards and away from the pelvis. Okay, and then let's bring the hands back down to the floor and come back up to upright sitting. We'll then remove the chair out of the way. We'll finish now in Shavasana, half fold blanket for your head. If you need any extra blanket for warmth, then take it. And lying flat to the floor, excuse me, lying flat to the floor, and the shoulders, we can tuck them under and away from the ears. Rather than doing one at a time, we can do both together. Make sure that as you do that, you're not narrowing the shoulders. We looked at it earlier. We want to keep that broadness across the backs of the shoulders, but the skin and the muscle fibre there being tucked under and away from the neck. Make sure that the back of the skull hasn't followed, so we can even just lift the head a fraction, look towards the toes, just to lengthen the skin there at the back of the neck and let the head rest back down onto the blanket. Don't overly straighten the neck, so there should remain a nice natural curvature there in the neck, but we want to make sure that the chin is not lifting. Chin sits down into the body. The biceps, they're turned outwards. It helps to keep the thumb side of the wrist down. It might need to be an active adjustment initially, but then you can just let the arms soften and relax. And there's a lot of tactile sensation associated with the inhalation, and it relates to different regions of the body throughout the body. But the really crucial one that we want to see very clearly, feel very clearly, that one of breathing in whilst letting the back of the pelvis descend down into the floor. Really lock onto that sensation. Each in-breath, feeling the back of the pelvis descending, releasing to the floor. In a similar way, a lot of tactile sensation correlating to the exhalation. And within that full body sensation, make sure that you're really clear with the navel descending. The tactile sensation associated with the navel descending throughout the exhalation. Smooth, even exhalation. Smooth, even inhalation. Letting the breath settle into its own natural rhythm. And then let's take a couple of slightly deeper in-breaths. And then from there, bend your knees so your feet come back flat to the floor. Bring your hands across your chest or abdomen. And then eyes open. And roll to the side and come up as you're ready. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.